The following is part of Cornell Contemporary China Initiative Lecture Series under the Cornell East Asia program. The arguments and viewpoints of this talk belong solely to the speaker. We hope you enjoy. Tami finished her PhD at my alma mater, University of Washington. We only just discovered recently. In 2010, where she studied anthropology, and has since 2012 been at Furman, teaching in the Department of Asian Studies there. She works on a range of topics, including media, and has produced some film work of her own, and also does considerable field work. She's spent the last year on a Fulbright fellowship, and recently produced a book called Doing Fieldwork in China with Kids. So we're here to listen to her talk tonight, Masculinities and Media in China's Not Communities. Please join me.
It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. So I know this is the Contemporary China Initiative, right? However, it's not that everything with regard to China needs to start with a big map of China and Beijing, start on the map. Because in this case, I don't know if you can see that little purple dot over there. We're in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and it's more ethnic minority, very diverse topography, a lot of different things culturally than in other parts of China. So that's kind of why I chose this kind of map to show you. And then let's zoom in a little bit more. This is the closer view of the terrain. When I first went to do fieldwork with this community, people said to me that in the family that I was living with, this is an extended family with about 20 people living at home at that particular time when all the students were home. And they said, oh, you're actually in Guowai. You're in the foreign country, because we speak a different language here. We have different customs. There's so many people. There's so many relatives. And for me, although I'd lived in China for quite some time already, it was just really hard to make sense of what the situation was there. And this is also the area that has recently been rebranded the ancient Tea Horse Road. So this is a very different topography. All right, everyone situated? You know where we are? Let's move on to the Na. How many of you have heard of the Na already in Chinese Mosul? Yeah, okay, it's about a third of you. Thank you to the people sitting up front. You win the contest. So they're very well known in China as the people that don't have marriage, that they don't have a word for father, they have free love, and all these things. Okay, please don't believe what I just said, because although that's what they're known for, those things are not actually true. That's just the stereotype. That's what's drawn so much attention to this community. And for better or for worse, most of that attention is fixated on the women. Okay, they can choose their partners. They have more rights and more freedoms and more respect than women in other parts of China. And at the same time, the men kind of get a funny reputation because of being part of this situation. So I'm going to go through some of the examples of how men are portrayed with some articles from online journalists, and then we'll look at some video clips and some other bits of media to kind of see what people have portrayed them as, and then we'll kind of try to unpeel that a little bit more and think about some of my interactions with men in those communities to see if, not to say that we're going to get a better sense of exactly what masculinity is like, but the different forms. Just look a little bit more at the different forms of masculinity. So The Guardian and many other journals newspapers and journals have written about these people. This one says, is the group the last matriarchy? Are women in power? Is this the place where women rule? And sometimes they conclude, well, actually, maybe it's not, because women actually are not living in a paradise, and they can't just sit back all day. And so there's all these kinds of different and unique debates that the newspaper articles are going through. And at the same time, they all seem to think they're the ones that discovered this group of people. So there are so many Western news organizations who've done basically the same story. Wow, there's this group of people that have an extended family system. The women can sleep with whoever they want, and they have extended families, and their kids have multiple mothers, and fathers aren't really part of the picture. And it's just like the same story over and over. Okay, so let's look at some of those examples. This is one from Der Spiegel online, and this is profiling an Argentine journalist who went and spent 2 months living in the Mosul community. It's Mosul in Chinese and Na in their own language, so I kind of go back between those two terms. And he said, they interviewed him to see what was it like for men in this region, okay? So he said, well, I wanted to see what was going to happen. What is it like in a place where women are in charge? And his conclusion was it's better for men in a place where women are in charge. And so he said some things about how when you're a man in a Mosul community, you're responsible for nothing, almost nothing. You work much less, you spend the whole day with your friends, you're with a different woman every night, and on top of that, you always live at your mother's house. Sounds good, right? It's a good setup. And I guess what I want to emphasize with this is as much about the person who's going to do that research and what he's looking for as what actually happens in that place. So the people in that community are amazingly adapted at kind of sizing up who is coming to visit them. Is it one of those 40-something feminists from the US who's really interested in matriarchy? Okay, we know what to tell her. It's a women's paradise, and there's no jealousy, no discussion, and no debate, no difficulty, no domestic violence. Everything is peachy. Is it a guy who might be kind of interested in having a relationship with a Mosul woman? Okay, we got the line for him too. And then in this case, we're seeing now filtered through Argentine culture, which I think is a tad patriarchal. So he's saying, well, the woman is serving the man and she's leading the way. And then he says the bad thing about my patriarchy is, sometimes the men even have to do the dishes. So it's clearly much better in Mosul community, right? He goes on to talk about the sex life of Mosul people, and I just wonder, what exactly was he doing for the 2 months that he was there? Because some of the things that he talks about are just totally off base. He talks about this hut, that every Mosul adult woman has her own hut where she receives lovers for the night, and I've spent years there. I'm not trying to say, I know more than he does, but honestly, there is no such thing as a hut that each woman has. They might have their own room. They do have their own bedroom usually, where they may receive lovers. Usually it's a pretty stable relationship. It's not like a different person coming every night like he's explaining. Who would want that, honestly? They're people just like we are. But anyway, he's got some kind of far-fetched stories here. Now, I don't blame him for making these things up, because it's quite possible that the people that he talked to in the tourist area thought, okay, we know what he wants to hear. He wants to hear this is an exciting land where, you can just sample anything you want. And so that's what he came home knowing. Now, I don't know what kind of translator he was using, but I've experienced people that have gone there with a great translator from Shanghai whose Putonghua is fantastic. But her Yunnanhua is not really, she can't really understand the local Yunnan dialect. And she definitely can't understand the Northwest Yunnan, sort of border with Sichuan dialect, okay? So, it's not entirely that I'm blaming him. Just wanted to show you a couple more things about the stereotypes of Mosul men. So we have almost this infantilization of men. They don't really understand. They're more like little boys. Women are effective. And men, if they do something wrong, well, they don't know better. They're just like children, right? I actually have heard that from people before. So that's something that I've heard people say in the tourist area. Men live better when women are in charge. And of course, this is the photo that illustrates that. You get to take a nap in between your duties rowing tourists around. These guys are not people at all. I can't tell exactly who they are, but they're visitors from outside, probably from a work unit that's come to see the lake. But this is the photo they've chosen to illustrate now men. So you have no responsibilities, you spend the whole day with your friends. Okay, keep that in mind as we move forward. No responsibilities, or what are people actually doing? This is a different website from a Spanish guy who spent some time living in China and kind of went through and said, okay, let's pick apart some of these urban legends, and he goes through a series of them. You can look on the website to see more. But I think he did a good job of picking apart this particular one. So he was one of those people who came to the lake really interested to find this paradise, this kingdom of women, and they realized, okay, it's not really what they bill it to be. So he says men don't need to work is not true. it's not that they need to rest all day, but they do the fishing, they do farming, they take care of preserving and killing animals so that people have things to eat all winter. There's plenty of other things they do. As for children, yes, they live with the mother, but men are responsible for taking care of their sister's children. And they do still have responsibilities to their own children as well. So it's a strong family structure. It's not like the one a lot of us might be used to, but it still is a very strong family structure. So, okay, we're starting to pick this apart. What I want to do now is go to a couple clips to give you a sense of what people are saying themselves. And I want to say once more, this is not necessarily what they are saying is fact, and that's actually the way things are. But this is what people have chosen to tell the media producers they've encountered, okay? I'm also not saying it's not true, but I just wanted to kind of preface this with that. So this is a film that was made in 2005. It aired on PBS Frontline. It's called The Women's Kingdom. It's all on YouTube. It's great. I really encourage you to watch it. And this is one of the people from a village in the mountains who went to speak with the filmmaker. And the filmmaker actually stayed at her house. So
in Mosul, uncles are much more important than fathers. Lato says she grew up with at least 8 uncles.
我大叔叔比爸爸都好嘛，家里面一起不在的时候，奶奶那些全部在看嘛，女孩子，嘛他的妈妈一定出去了，都那些就一定要他叔叔呀、奶奶呢，那些去一定要看他们。我以前小的时候，一般都是我叔叔那些我给我东西那些，一般都是我叔叔的，和我姨那些没给我长大嘛。
In the past, Mosul men took long caravan trips over muddy roads filled with leeches. Now, there are paved roads, the trips are shorter, and men spend more time at home. Luzu Jatsuo, like most Mosul men, stays with his own family, taking care of his sister's children.
这种情况，我们都是姥姥的，我们姥姥他们照顾我们，就是他孩子了，反正就去照顾他。你不管？我都是随便的衣服啊，穿的随便的一点点就去。我送到那人就很豪爽，到处都可以玩。
Okay, so a different view of Mosul masculinity, but still, you know, he's explaining that he's got some good things going. I just wanted you to see this, that it shows the really robust role that uncles play within people's lives. It's not just, okay, you don't take care of your own children because they don't live with you. This second clip is from Broadly. It's a Vice program, if anyone's familiar with that. So the land where women rule inside China's last matriarchy. And here we have a Swedish woman who has done a lot of work with Vice, and she's trying to figure out what is the situation after all. This again is like a really common theme. A foreign journalist comes to the community, is fascinated to find this group of people no one ever heard of before, and wow, it's fascinating. So these people, the men that she speaks with, are in a tourist zone, and they're very kind of accustomed to helping the tourists hear what they're interested in. So let's listen to what they have to say.
多半都在跟女孩子划船呢。以前走婚的时候都是划船到里面那个草坪里面去玩。有时候有个请人屋嘛，里面草坪里面还有个请人屋，多半都跟女孩划船的多半。
So romantic, very romantic. Have things changed since the old days in terms of how the walking marriage works?
民族走婚的时候，你男的上女方家去了，女方家那个妈妈听见了的，他当作没听见一样，他不可能来抓你。你反正不是住嘴的话就不能。
走婚这个来说的话，我已经走了的姑娘将近上150了。以前我开大车的时候嘛，干，先把一个这个村庄走了，哎，我说家里有事，在2点钟起床了，2点起床，有些姑娘在酒吧烧烤里面耍，给我打电话。 我要去在酒吧里面烧炕里面，要喊一个在街上就睡觉。
So women here work really hard. Do men have more spare time?
走婚这个对男生是最好的一个时代了。家里面活儿什么都不怎么种嘛，反正都一般都女的当家，他可能都女的来管家嘛，我们都一般都很少干活。
So a different perspective. At the lake, some of these things are really happening. So people from outside come in to find the very sexy and macho Mosul men. They might have romantic encounters. This does happen quite a lot. The question is, is this Mosul masculinity, or what exactly is going on here? So next I'm going to show you some excerpts from a film called The Fall of Womenland, but this actually is not a YouTube, this is within the PowerPoint. So The Fall of Womenland profiles a woman named Bima. She's from Ligo village. The last men were from Sichuan, Sichuan side of Lugu Lake, and Bima is in a village on the Yunnan side of Lugu Lake. And she has a lot of things to say about walking marriage, and so do the people in her village. So we'll hear from her. We're going to look at the screenshots that have subtitles, so we won't go to the video again. So she says people always think walking marriage is bad, that men are irresponsible, and that women are working too hard. That's her father, by the way, that she's working with. And she says, I disagree. Mosul men are responsible. My man doesn't work for me, but he does work for his sisters where he lives. It's kind of interesting the filmmakers have chosen to show a shot of her father where she's talking about her partner, but okay, whatever. And then these two young men are interviewed, and they talk about how they've become really part of the tourist visit economy. And so they're pretty fun. This is on Vimeo if you're interested, The Fall of Womenland. They say, from an outside perspective, our walking marriage is very simple. It's like we're primitive people in primitive societies. We mate whenever we feel the urge. It's like sex with no strings attached. That's ridiculous, right? This is what they're saying. The tourists think that they've experienced a walking marriage, but that's not the case. And these scenes are from the nightly bonfire party that tourists will go to, where the men will, everyone in the village, the young people from each household will dance, and then there will be a singing competition of the local people and the visitors, and then they'll move on. But this is what the men are saying. This is just the background of that party. He says, we don't consider that a walking marriage. For us, sexual intercourse is just one way of having fun. Okay, it's only a way of having fun. And then he says, they cheat us too, actually, right? They say that they're sincere, that they love us, but actually they come for just a day to have sex with me. Is that being sincere? Come on. So it's a really interesting way that the people there are negotiating the kind of stereotype. Like, what would you do if you were a young man in a society where everyone had this feeling that anyone can have sex with no strings attached and no consideration of whether your household economies match up, whether your parents will approve of the relationship, whether you have an apartment and a car and a stable job and thousands of yuan in the bank? The guys do take advantage of it, right? But they're saying this is not visiting marriage. This is just, having fun. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon happening there too. Not totally unlike university life sometimes, right? Okay, so now let's look at some different perspectives. So all of those things were produced either for media makers from the outside or produced by people in the tourist zone who are really accustomed to what people in the tourist zone want and also have adapted to the realities of living in a place like that. To look at what life is actually like for some men, I'm going to show some clips from a film that was produced by one of my collaborators. His name is Onsa Arching, and he is the director of the Mosul Folk Museum along with Ruhan Doji. He worked with a museum professional, Xia Chunbo, to make this film, What Shall We Do? Change in Loshui Village. And it's a pretty neat film. It actually is mostly interviews. It has nothing at all about this is the society where there are walking marriages, and this is the beautiful place. And they actually participated in this Ford Foundation workshop. And the other participants who came from ethnic minority communities all over the sort of mainland Southeast Asia region, they said, we want to know more about your society. Tell us what it's like there, and what are the customs, and how do people live? And they said, no. This film is not that film. There are millions of those films. There really are hundreds of films like that. They said this is just going to be people in the village that has been a tourist center and what they think about things going on in their village. So this is Arche, Cao Honghua, and Xia Chunbo, and these slides are auto-advancing, so they will go pretty fast. That kind of keeps us on pace. So group this into different sections following what the film does. So among the boatmen, he was the only man at first. Other people in the village thought serving tourists was really low and shamefaced. But if he didn't go rowing, he wouldn't have money to spend. But if he went rowing, he'd be under a lot of pressure. So everyone laughed at me. And I just put the things that he said on one screen here. Gradually, people adjusted to the idea of men rowing boats for tourists, and that became a very lucrative business in the village. So alcohol consumption, I'll just let you read the slides. I think you can do that while they flap on. So this is a perspective of an older man in the village, more of a senior person. Yes. So this is what he's saying. We did drink, we behaved ourselves, but people today forget themselves after they drink. And they even quarrel and fight with others. So the behavior is really going to an extreme that it hadn't before. So the young people's perspective, it's common to treat each other when we go out to drink. But then if we treat each other, then I have no money to turn into my family like I ought to as part of this extended household. So I'm nervous and afraid of being scolded. If I don't treat them, I'll blame myself. And if I do treat them, I get in really big trouble. I'm really worried. So you can see there are a lot of pressures for them. And this person says pretty much the same thing. I'm really nervous when I have to turn in money I don't have because I've treated everyone. When I'm having fun, I tell myself, relax, just enjoy yourself. But after enjoying myself and using up the money, I worry that I will be scolded by my family. And a lot of the new income has created these pressures. So he's saying a lot of people don't study very hard because they know they can come back to this nice life in the village. But then they keep the income from rowing for themselves, and then this is a very high conflict situation for the families. So tourism has introduced some new problems in the village. So what's in the future? Two grandparents have their perspectives. I don't know what it'll be like. And they said before this, things are really bad before, and now we have it really good. I can enjoy this life until the end of my life, but I don't know what the future will be for the younger generation. And they both said about how, they used to have to do all kinds of arduous things to obtain what they needed to live on. Grow their own rice, gather their own firewood, go way up into the mountains and do all these things. And now rice is delivered to the door. Firewood is delivered to the door. They used to have an article of clothing and have to wear it for a very long time. But now they could keep their clothing, throw it out when it gets a hole in it and buy something new. So it's a pretty dramatic difference. Okay, so now let's look at what things are actually like for men. For my own fieldwork images, and a couple of images from other people as well. Well, I think just like in any context, there is a range of occupations and activities people are engaged in. And this matters a lot. It depends on what age you are and where you live, as well as just who you are, personally. What kind of person are you and what priorities do you have? So I just put a list of things up here, and I'm going to give you some photo examples of those in a minute. But before doing that, I do want to say the roles of fathers specifically. I don't have an image for that, but I co-authored an article about that in American Anthropologist that talks about a lot of specific ways that fathers are contributing to their children's lives. So again, it's more complicated than the stereotype. Men are really involved in their kids' lives as well. Okay, so on the left here, we have some people that are involved with a model Mosul family operation. Some of them are from the government, some of them are local people working as tour guides. I like the guy with his hair kind of up. I think you could just see a little bit of diversity. There are different people, different ages involved in some of these things. And this photo in the bottom is a dance competition as part of a festival. Younger men, where it's really important for them to kind of be beautiful and help their village win the dance competition. So for younger men, that's a different kind of activity. Same festival. This is an older man that was the grandpa in one of the houses that I stayed in. And he spent a lot of time preparing the prayer flags for the festival that his family members would take and kind of plant near the goddess mountain and use as part of their sacred activities for that day. There also are Tibetan Buddhist monks who are in the community, and I'm sorry, this is pretty dark, it's hard to see. It was taken very early in the morning, right before cremation happened as part of a funeral. Well, as part of a cremation, as part of the funerary rituals. And so that's something that also occupies a lot of men in Mosul communities. They are very fervent believers in Tibetan Buddhism. Here we get back to the festival. You can see this man is driving, so it's just my quick illustration of driving as another occupation. And then the man on the left, he's a na daba. So he's a ritual specialist who will conduct ceremonies if someone gets sick. If there's a funeral, he'll be part of that ceremony. If there's any kind of need that he has in the community, that people have in the community, he can come and help. But yet he's wearing the suit and the hat and everything. And here I am in my goofy, clothing that my friends wanted me to wear. So this is where I'm going to start bringing my own activities as an anthropologist into this discussion as well, because whoever is there doing the research is going to have a particular perspective on, what it's like there. And I don't know how many of you are anthropology students or professionals, but it's something anthropologists think a lot about, is how does our own position affect the types of conversations we're having. And I think I showed you some examples of that already with the media creators, but it happens with us too. And so the book that I wrote earlier that I co-edited about doing fieldwork with kids was part of just really thinking through how does my own role and my own personal identity affect my fieldwork. And the same thing I think you can see here. Did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that the language in the specific region is different from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Is the religion also different?
They have a local religion and an indigenous religion, and then they also believe in what we often call Tibetan Buddhism. So there are other minority groups that share either very similar indigenous religions or are also Tibetan Buddhist in that region. But definitely distinct from, say, Han Chinese religion in eastern China. Okay. So this is going back to a documentary screenshot. This is my friend Jiba in a documentary that National Geographic Television produced that I was a field associate producer for. And he has a really interesting story. He's the father of twins now. At the time, he was kind of profiled for being a father who is in a visiting relationship. Only the child that he was profiled as having wasn't actually his own child, even though he said it was. So it just gets really complicated. And because I was there for a long time, and I had known him previously, after a while, things just didn't seem quite right. And he said, well, I really wanted you to be able to make a good documentary. So you were looking for a father with a child to film, so I wanted to help you out. So that's what I helped you film. We have this whole elaborate structure. You can watch that. It's fairly easy to find that online too. It's the Blood Bonds episode of Taboo 2. But again, it's a little complicated what you see. In terms of what he does farming work. He is an entrepreneur. He bought all kinds of medicinal plants and tried to grow those. It didn't really go so well, so he's kind of on to the next venture now. But you could just as easily show him sitting in the field and smoking a cigarette and then say, look, all men are so lazy. They don't do anything. They're not responsible for anything because they live in this country where women do all the work, right? And then this is a driver. He's a tourist guide and a driver, and here he's, working on silver. So I think you get the picture. People are doing a whole lot of different things. These photos show Arche. He's the one right here. That's Arche. And he's the one that was the Mosul Folk Museum curator as well. These are photos from a group of Furman faculty and students from Yunnan Minzu University who came to explore Lugu Lake as part of an environmental project. And he took us around the mountain. So, just another role of what men do in this community. But I wanted to include a couple of the goofy photos. Someone had a fan, and then we started posing for pictures. And there he is with his beautiful polka-dotted fan on the end of this hike in the mountains. And just one more photo. This is a recent one from that summer, too. I guess it was 2015, with Doji, the other museum director, and Gizo Dasha, who was our driver and tour guide. So there are just a lot of different perspectives that you see from the people in that area. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the context here for some of the things that I've been showing you specific to the Na community and what gender looks like and masculinity looks like there. One article that I like a lot and I think is really helpful in thinking through some of the things we see in this community is Macho Minority, Masculinity and Ethnicity on the Edge of Tibet by Ben Hillman and Leanne Henfrey. And they kind of go through that stereotype of this long-haired, really hyper-masculine Tibetan guy who is involved in hosting a lot of women that are very attracted to this kind of persona. It's quite different from the kind of men they might meet in a Chinese city in a different part of China. So what is that all about? And how can we kind of put that into the broader political and economic context? Why have men in those areas been sort of almost put on a pedestal as sex symbols, as sex objects? And what does that have to do with broader minority politics in the region? So I think there's some very similar things happening in the lakeside communities in the research area that I work in. And I think we can see similar things happening elsewhere. And then we also see in the areas that don't have much influence from tourism, nothing like this is happening. I mean, people, if you walk up to a guy in the mountains in a Na village, he's not going to tell you, yeah, I have 100 lovers and I sneak off to visit this one at 2 a.m. and then I go to that one and I say I'm going home and then I find my other partner. It's just not going to happen. I mentioned this before, but as anthropologists, we also think a lot about our own identities as researchers and how that influences the access we get to the people we speak with in our research. And so I just wanted to give a few examples of other people that have looked at masculinity and gender in ethnography within China. So Anxious Wealth by John Osberg, he looked at businessmen in Chengdu and some of the very intense pressures that they had to perform a certain gender role. And Ariane Gaetano with Out to Work looked at the role that women had in trying to balance the expectations from their families to be a good filial daughter, but also make their own way in an urban context that was very different from anything that their families had dealt with before. And then Liu Xiaohua, working in an area pretty similar to where I work, she worked on manhood in Nosu communities where HIV epidemics were a huge problem and drug epidemics. Drug addiction was a big issue as well. all of these anthropologists have talked about how their own identity has affected the kind of research they've been able to do. And as anthropologists, we have this concept of honorary male. Because as an independent person going to study in a community, I can talk with men, I can talk with women, you kind of fit into both categories but belong perfectly in neither. So that actually helps a lot in terms of helping us think through some of these gender constructions and the arbitrariness of some of them and the specific ways in which they're deployed as well. We also have to keep in mind there are many different layers to identity. So all those roles that I showed you of, a religious specialist or a younger man, an older man, middle-aged man living in a different place, those are all different aspects of our identity that intersect to create our gender identity and our presentation to the world. So to conclude, we have to remember masculinity means different things to different people, and people are always thinking, okay, which is my audience? How do I appeal to that person? It sometimes relates to what reality is in that community, and sometimes not exactly. We just have to be really careful as we look through that. And so those are some of the examples that I mentioned before too. An older woman, an elderly couple, or a younger person coming to the community might have very different interests and very different outcomes accordingly. And last but not least, we really have to be careful when we look at some of those documentaries to see what's actually going on within the way that the production is being created. So you're really trying not to take things literally that you see, but putting them into broader context. So I don't know if anyone's going out to do fieldwork in China, but in case you are, a few lessons to leave you with. First of all, be really careful when you're told something that you're looking to hear, and be really careful if you're using translators, so definitely make every effort to learn language. If you can stay a longer time or go on many visits, that's much more effective than just staying a short time and having a quick visit, because, wow, there are some wild things that come out of those quick visits. And finally, triangulating what you find is really helpful. So if someone tells you one thing, asking another person about that person's behavior might reveal, like, okay, that guy has only had one girlfriend ever that we know about, and he's just a big liar. Or, yeah, actually he does have 100 lovers, not 100 liars. So just trying to get a more nuanced understanding of what people say and do is really crucial. And there are other ways you can do that too. If you have the documentary that was produced by that individual and see what they say, that'll help too. All right, so I've used up a lot of time already. Thank you so much for your attention and for your patience with my tech issues. And